Hi everyone, this is Hana, and welcome back to my island. In a recent video, I talked about the Asian secretary character, Jin Chao, in the movie The Devil Wears Prada 2. And I talked about how she is just used as a flat stereotype in the media. In the typical Hollywood formula, the white main character drives the story, grows, and gets a glamorous makeover. Meanwhile, the Asian character is stuck in a 100-year-old stereotype from start to finish. Even in the 21st century AI era, nothing has changed. Well, there was a very interesting reaction to this video. Most of you islanders visiting my channel agreed. You stood in solidarity. You recognize that this movie is a prime example of the deep structural racism in our world. But there were also completely different reactions. I get it. And you guys know I love observing people and society and collectives, right? So today I want to share my thoughts on this with you. Shall we? So in the first Devil Wears Prada, making Andy, the white lead, a nerd, was a temporary plot device. It was there to show her dramatic change and growth. On the other hand, making Jin Chao a nerd in part 2 is just a cheap trick. It just uses the same old, tired stereotype of the othered Asian, giving a white lead a real growth arc, while trapping an Asian character in a flat stereotype is a massive power imbalance. But the backlash I got wasn't a healthy debate. It was a fierce defense mechanism from the privileged. First, some white viewers, some white people tried to lecture me, as always. They said Andy in part 1 was also tacky at first. They insisted the Asian secretary would eventually get a makeover too. I just hit them with a simple fact. I said, ironically, this movie premiered here in South Korea first, so I have already watched the entire movie. Until the very end, Jin Chao gets absolutely no character arc or glamorous makeover. I called out the Hollywood elite for making their characters so flat. So why did some white people get so incredibly angry and defensive with me? This bizarre backlash perfectly exposed the massive power dynamics in our world. It's a messy mix of deep-rooted white supremacy and the complex hierarchy within the Asian community itself. When you're used to privileged, equality feels like oppression. I mentioned this before in a video I made about gender equality. When they couldn't argue with the logic, they resorted to cheap shots. They tried to distract people by insulting my looks or mocking my English accent. There's a word for this cowardly behavior in sociology. It's called tone policing. It's a way to control people. When people in power cannot logically fight back, they attack the messenger. They pick on your tone, your accent, or your emotions to kill the message. It's the exact same trick the US president uses every day on the global news. When they started losing their power to control the narrative, they throw up a wall. They lean on their fragile white privilege to silence the messenger. I called out their arrogance. My response was, the reason my English has an accent is because English is not my mother tongue. It's clear proof that I can speak at least 2 languages. I'm actually accommodating you by speaking your language. How dare you nitpick my accent? If my accent is the only thing you can attack, that means you understood my message perfectly, right? If you dislike my accent so much, why don't you try learning Korean? It's a crazy paradox. Monolinguals acting superior to someone who speaks 2 languages. It was an arrogance only native English speakers could offer. I have learned so much by crossing different cultures and languages. These monolingual speakers, like frogs in a well, never had the right to casually judge and mock it in the first place. They have never put in the minimum effort to communicate with the others. But just because I speak their language, they acted like they had all the power. There was another interesting point. They routinely lump other races into massive groups like Asians, Blacks, or Latinos. But the moment I refer to them as white, they try to lecture me again. Oh, I'm not like that. Don't generalize people. Don't generalize white people, they always said. For so long, white people have been the unmarked category. They are just seen as a default human being. They don't need a special label. And they also have the privilege of individuality. If one person of color makes a mistake, the whole race gets blamed. But white people are always treated as unique individuals. They commit the violence of boxing other races into stereotypes every single day. But they go crazy when they are put in the racial box themselves. When you're used to privilege, equality feels like oppression. They have lived their entire lives as the universal standard for humanity, judging other races at will. The moment their power of interpretation is taken away and they are called out as specific race, they feel extreme threat. This is perfect example of white fragility, as crying victim at the slightest criticism. When you're born with that kind of privilege, even a simple request to look at yourself feels like a massive attack. In the end, their attacks against me were basically a white flag. Faced with criticism armed with facts and logic, they confessed to themselves just how flimsy the sandcastle of their privilege really is. Another cheap trick people use to hide their weak logic is false equivalence. Some people absurdly ask, why only criticize Hollywood when K-dramas don't cast white or black people? Others asked why there were no white or black people in K-pop Demon Hunters. I was honestly shocked. First of all, K-pop Demon Hunters is a project created by Sony, an American corporation with American capital. They merely used Korean culture and K-pop in their movie. The Korean film industry had nothing to do with it. Comparing a Hollywood movie to a movie set in Korea makes zero sense. Also, Asians have never begged or expected to be cast as characters in Hollywood movies. Furthermore, the US is a multi-ethnic immigrant nation. Showing diverse races is a must there because it's the reality. The Korean market, on the other hand, has a completely different demographic background. For lead roles, you need perfect native level Korean. If you know any white or black actors who can deliver subtle emotional acting in a native level Korean, please let me know. Comparing Hollywood's systemic racism to Korea's language barrier is just lazy and deceptive. Then came the endless carpet bombing of whataboutism. Doesn't Korea also discriminate? It's hypocritical for you, a Korean, to criticize white mainstream racism. How dare you, they said. Yes, there are racists in every single country in the world. I actually made a video before calling out racists here in South Korea. The kind of logic just makes marginalized people turn on each other. This is quite interesting. When East Asians criticize the blatant white centricity of Western society, Southeast Asians try to silence them by saying, "Don't you discriminate against us too?" But inside Southeast Asia, I lived there for 10 years. They also discriminate against the South Asian based on skin color or money. So my point is, If we keep pointing out each other's flaws and applying endless double standards like this, eventually no one in this world will earn the right to speak up about the absurdities of the massive system. The worst part about whataboutism is that it completely destroys moral standards. When someone asks, "Are you completely clean?" the real issue disappears. It just becomes a messy mud fight. If you have to be perfect to criticize someone, then nobody can ever speak up. Whataboutism was used as a propaganda tactic during the Cold War. When people criticized the Soviet Union for human rights, they said, "What about American racism?" It's still being used today. In my last video, when I criticized the Japanese military sexual slavery, some people said, "Hasn't Korea done anything wrong?" When I criticized Israel's genocide in Gaza, they brought up Hamas's terrorism to defend Israel. If we follow this logic, we have to stay quiet about the worst tragedies in history. It becomes a strong shield for the war criminal nations of World War II and the current nations committing war crimes. When invaders said, "Didn't you also do this in the past?" their current crimes just get written off as common tragedies. This logic grants indulgence to the perpetrators and lowers the standard of justice. This is the trap of relativism. Without absolute moral standards, only the strong survive. They used our small flaws to excuse their massive crimes and genocides, eventually reaching the nihilistic conclusions that no one can cast the first stone results in a tragic outcome where those exercising the most cruel violence smoothly escape the net of judgment. Philosopher Hannah Arendt warned about this. Whataboutism destroys healthy public debate. It makes people give up on the truth. If we just say, "Everyone makes mistakes, everyone is bad," we will never fix the real problems. The thinker Antonio Gramsci called this cultural hegemony. It tricks the weak into blaming each other instead of fighting the powerful. When people think everyone is equally bad, they stop fighting for change. And the only people who win are the elites at the top of the pyramid. Whataboutism ultimately functions as a perfect indulgence that solidifies the ruling system of the establishment. But what hurt me more than white racism was the reaction from some Asians. They said I just had an inferiority complex toward white people. This is a textbook example of internalized racism, which Frantz Fanon talked about. The tragedy of black skin, white mask is happening to Asians right now. Some minorities try so hard to become honorary whites. They erase their own identity to feel safe with the elites. This isn't just trying to fit in. It's basically spiritual self-harm. They stay quiet when white people discriminate, but attack people they think are lower than them. When I said in a recent video that we Koreans also need to reflect on and repent for our discrimination against the Southeast Asians, many Koreans attacked me. What they said, Southeast Asians act that way because they have an inferiority complex toward Korea. We didn't discriminate against them. Sounds familiar? Blaming the victim like this is the exact proof. It's a cowardly survivor tactic. They climb one step up the pyramid and kick down the people below them. Looking down on your own people just proves you are a tiny cog in a racist machine. Copying the oppressor to rule over people they think are beneath them is a huge contradiction. It's a vicious disease that keeps the cycle of discrimination alive at the very bottom. Looking back, my life has been a constant fight against a different type of discrimination. Like scholar Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality theory says, oppression never comes in just one form. My identity is a complex mix of age, gender, and race. And society always attacked the weakest link. When I was young, my thoughts and voice were often ignored under the excuse of my age. I was too young. As an adult in Korean society, I faced the restrictions simply because I was a woman. Abroad, I was judged and silenced for being both Asian and woman. In this endless cycle, the voices of minority women are completely erased. East Asians are taught to be considerate and careful and polite, quiet, but Western society often exploits this. When we bottle up racism and insults to keep the peace, they mistake our patience for weakness. They took advantage of our good manners as if it was their right. They thought our patience meant they had power over us. They treated Asians like pushovers. Our silence wasn't weakness, it was a high level of courtesy. But they weren't cultured enough to get that. I'm so tired of those arrogant people constantly judging me by my age, gender, and race. The main reason I started this channel was to break the limits of the outsider's gaze. There are many videos about Korea, but most of them are made by Westerners who don't really understand our deep culture. I wanted to correct these shallow narratives myself. I wanted to be the speaker, not just the subject. At first, I was scared. My English isn't perfect and I overthought everything. But I kept going because my international friends and you, the islanders, you gave me courage. Yes, I deal with some arrogant white supremacist, racist, and sexist. But there are also people all over the world showing genuine empathy and solidarity. They are willing to empower my voice. And that is what gave me courage. It showed me that human connection is way stronger than race. I spent my 20s in the clubs of Hongdae Street, hanging out with the wild, beautiful, and pure people. And I spent 10 years right in the middle of the fierce and glamorous Korean fashion magazine industry. Writing about the world and people, looking past the trends made me tough. But surrounded by luxury brand launching parties, I realized I didn't want that life. Because the view changes depending on where you stand. I became curious about the stories of more diverse and more people. I moved abroad for 10 years. I carved out my own path all by myself or without knowing a single soul. I met people with totally different languages and cultures. I learned to see the big picture and understand the hidden truth of the world. I saw and learned about the world beneath the sea, below the calm surface. This entire process of weaving it into essays and novels was by no means an accident. I have crashed, broken down, and survived in the real world. I think that gives me every right to speak up. I have no reason to work on eggshells for arrogant people anymore. Let me be clear, I'm not playing the victim here. Honestly, their hate doesn't bother me. Living under the sea for 10 years and now deep in the forest, taught me how to be truly free. I resent no one and nothing. I love who I am. I'm happy and grateful for my life. But my peace does not mean I don't care. Just because I'm free doesn't mean I can ignore the people still trapped in the dark. The reason I keep speaking up even when I'm exhausting is simple. We have to make this world a better place. That is exactly why my voice is important, your voice is important, and finally, our voices must come together as one. The world's standards are deformed and unfair. People in power like Trump casually drop terrifying lines like, a whole civilization will die tonight. People call that influence and just swallow it whole. But when we try to speak the truth and be ourselves, we get silenced. I'm done with this absurd comedy. They accept destructive words but call out honest words too sensitive. Now I will absolutely never be afraid to raise my voice. Other people's judgments or the heavy anchors of my age, gender, or race can never make me sink. A woman who doesn't drop anchor doesn't sink. I will keep sailing with the facts, logic, and a real love for humanity. When we break the silence and listen to each other, we can crack the pyramid of oppression. I hope more people will join this wave to fight the arrogance of power. And I would be honored if you islanders join me on that journey. All right, this has been Hana's Island. You're safe here now. If you want to keep sailing with me, leaving a like and subscribing would mean the world. Drop your stories or anything you're curious about in the comments down below. I'll be waiting for you right here next time. Until then, rest easy on an island that perfectly aligns with your latitude. Take care. Bye.